For those of you who don't already know me or who have not previously been on some of our webinars, I came to Cybercrime Support Network after having retired from the FTC. I worked there for about 35 years, and I had the pleasure of working with Steve Baker, who's one of our panelists today. My experience has been in litigating cases civilly against cyber crime and internet fraudsters, as well as others who are perpetrators.
Cindy, you're on mute. Cindy, I don't know if you can hear me, but we've lost your sound. You've been muted for a bit. Sorry about that. 1 second. Nope, we don't. We still don't have sound from you, Cindy.
Cindy? We don't have you. Hi, everybody. Until we get Cindy back, my name's Mark Batchelor. I'm with Community-Based Programs, and I want to apologize for our technical difficulties. So I'm just going to ask our panelists to just introduce themselves, starting with Steve Baker of the Baker Fraud Support. Steve, your fraud report covers everything, so tell us about you and what the report does.
Sure. I put out a weekly newsletter of what's going on with mass marketing fraud around the world. It's free. You can feel free to sign up. Go to just send me an email at steve@bakerfraudreport.com. I'll be happy to add you, and it goes out Thursday morning, so it picks up research, other lots prosecutions, and other sorts of what is actually happening out there. There's always a lot going on. So they wanted to talk about one of the top frauds that we see out there, and one biggest category for the FTC are imposter frauds. Well, what does that mean? Because of course,
Steve, if you don't mind, we're gonna I'll just have the other two introduce themselves, and then we'll have
sure,
more fluid. No, that's okay. Thank you. How about Bill?
Hi, so my name's Bill Malek. I work with Trend Micro. I've been in IT for over 45 years. Began as a programmer. I wrote COBOL code in the 1970s, went to IBM, worked on the mainframe operating system in the 80s, helped guide that through B1, B2 certification, if you recall the original Rainbow series about the security of computer systems. In the 90s, I joined Gartner, and while there, I managed the information security strategy service and also the middleware service. And after the turn of the millennium, I was with KPMG as an IT auditor for a while. I was CTO of a startup called WaveSet in the identity management space. And I worked as an independent with various consulting engagements, mostly in North America, on information security, disaster recovery, and identity management. I joined Trend about 4 years ago, and my meaning and purpose is to talk about information security, what the problems are, and most importantly, what we can do about them.
Thank you. Thank you. And Matt, thank you for joining us.
Sure, thank you. My name is Matthew O'Neill. I'm a special agent with the U.S. Secret Service. I'm assigned to our criminal investigative division, and currently I run our asset forfeiture branch, which on average years we will seize as an agency between $100 and $200 million. Largely due to COVID related pandemic frauds, we've seized about $1.3 billion so far this fiscal year. If you're not familiar with the Secret Service, and why we talk about fraud, we were founded in 1865 in the Department of the Treasury to combat counterfeit after the end of the Civil War. It wasn't until 1901 when we picked up permanent protection, which a lot of people know us more by, but we've had a dual or integrated mission of protecting the financial infrastructure of the country, along with obviously physical protection of world leaders who come to the United States, along with the president and vice president since 1901. It was in 2003 when we transitioned to the Department of Homeland Security, but we still retained our sort of investigative legacy mission.
Wow, that's fantastic. So this is going to be a great conversation. So Steve, you started. Let's first talk about the most prevalent types of scams out there, and I think you're going to start talking about some imposter scams. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, it's so this imposter scams, it shouldn't be any much surprise. That's the biggest topic the Federal Trade Commission gets complaints about. But there's all kinds of imposters. So what kinds are we talking about? There are people that impersonate the government, which is really serious. There are people that impersonate private industries, for example, Microsoft with tech support frauds. And there are people that pretend they're somebody else, romance frauds, where they pretend to be a rich, dashing Secret Service agent who just wants to meet you in so those are very, very so there's a tremendous amount of fraud. I mean, it went from, and it's gone up recently. It was we had $1.8 billion in reported fraud in 2019. It went up to $3.1 billion last year. So the pandemic is surely responsible for some of that. We've got people online more often who are not sure they're dealing with. The fraudsters have also upped their game. So government imposter scams. The most common are people that pretend to be Social Security or the IRS. With the Social Security scam, they tell you your number has been suspended, which Social Security numbers aren't suspended. And then they transfer you to somebody who pretends to be a law enforcement agent, often FBI, DEA, or Secret Service, I suppose, who says that, you know, your car was found abandoned in El Paso, and it had all sorts of drugs and cash, and there's blood there, and the car was rented using your Social Security number. So your asset, and you say, I've never been to El Paso in my life. They said, okay, don't worry. Since your assets are going to be frozen, we need you to go buy gift cards. We can put your money in a safe location, and we'll come by in 2 days and give you a new Social Security number and give you your money back. Then they have people run all over town buying gift cards. As soon as they read those numbers off the back, they have your money. And of course, nobody shows up. Social Security is extremely concerned about this. That's really, you've probably gotten calls yourself. So that's a really common one. We also have prize and sweepstakes people calling and pretending to be from the federal government when they're not, claiming that because of all the fraud in the area, the government is now awarding sweepstakes prizes, which they're not. I had these folks impersonating me for a while. We've got grandparent schemes where people call and says, Grandma, it's your favorite grandson. She says, Joey? She says, yeah. She says, I was not, don't tell mom and dad, but friends and I went to Mexico and I got in a car wreck and I'm in jail. Gee, your voice sounds funny. I know I busted my nose in the car wreck. Can you send some money? to get me out. And so that's very, very common, unfortunately. And then there are tech support frauds where people call and pretend to be from Microsoft or Apple to claim they've got problems with your computer that they've detected, and they just need to remote into your computer, and then they show you what's supposedly wrong, but they show you perfectly normal files, and there's really not a problem with your computer. These tend to be out of India. There's huge sales rooms in India that are calling people. Most of you have probably gotten those sorts of calls every day. Romance frauds, like I said, I think they're one of the scariest. They're the second largest overall dollar loss that's reported to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. It's massive amounts of money. People meet online with fake profiles. They leave them along for months. People get like text messages every morning telling them how much somebody loves them. Eventually, at least for victims that are women, they claim to be widowed men, not divorced, but widowed with minor child. And then the minor child, then there's a reason why you need money to help the child with a medical emergency or something. And they rip people off. More recently, those have been doing stuff like pushing cryptocurrency investments on people too. But it's really bad. So there may well be 1 million victims in the United States. This operates all around the world. All these frauds do. And and people are emotionally devastated. The Australians think they've got more suicides from this than they do murders.
Yeah, and these romance scams, we see the devastation, and CSN has actually started a peer support program for romance scam victims, and so far it's been very successful. So we see the damage that this causes. Bill, where did these? I'm sorry, Matt. Do we know where these originate? Is there a difference between the approach that maybe a foreign actor would take to that of homegrown criminals, and are they standalone or organized?
Well, no, as Steve mentioned, a lot of them are coming from call centers. A lot of them originate, as was mentioned, from India. Previously, we would see them like Jamaican lottery scams, similar type sort of MOs where they'll reach out via text message or email or phone call to try to engage with the purported victim. One of the things that there's always so, and also with romance scams, a lot of those are cultivated on dating websites designed and targeted for older people. So you won't find those scams on sort of the app type dating sites, but the older the sort of more legacy websites designed for folks in their 50s and 60s and 70s is where a lot of the romance scams originate. And a lot of them are being used to cultivate both to steal from them, and also it's a huge part, as we'll talk about business email compromise, a huge part of that is creating money mule networks through romance scam victims. But when you mention domestic or foreign, a lot of it's the same sort of MO that they're using, but the majority of what we're seeing is coming from overseas.
Yeah, especially with the romance frauds, that's Nigerians. I actually sat in a trial of one, and they are very organized crime gangs. And the Nigerians, it's a huge country. It's bigger than Russia, believe it or not, and English-speaking population without a whole lot of much in the way of jobs. So they got some very bright people, and there's been a diaspora out of Nigeria. So the Nigerian gangs are now living all over the world, including in the United States and Canada. And they even arrested somebody at the grocery store in St. Louis, where I am, just a couple of months ago, a Nigerian guy who'd come here. So the same Nigerian organized crime gangs run business email compromise. They run a whole lot of other frauds at the same time, and there's massive amounts of money going out to them.
So this is pretty widespread stuff, and it's not just for the individuals. You mentioned business email compromise. Bill, can you tell us more about how imposter scams impact business, and maybe walk us through one of the more common scenarios?
Well, a year ago, January, a colleague of mine reported this. He's the CISO for a group at a large bank in Manhattan. And the event, which she described, began with an email to a fellow who was an administrative assistant to a senior executive. Hey, Fred, it's Joe. Congratulations on your boy's performance in soccer last week. He looked great. By the way, we're getting towards the end of the quarter and we have this outstanding invoice. If you just, rattle a cage of the folks over in accounts payable and get this thing out, we'd like to have the money recorded before the end of the quarter. And so Fred takes the email from his friend Joe and forwards it down to accounts payable and says, please handle ASAP and let me know when it's done. Gets a message back 15 minutes later saying the account number isn't valid. So Fred picks up the phone, calls his friend Joe and said, the account number you sent us isn't valid. Maybe you made a typo? And his friend Joe said, what are you talking about? The email was fraudulent. The information in the email was compiled from available sources on Facebook and LinkedIn. From Facebook, they learned that Fred was an executive assistant with a son who was in the soccer group. From LinkedIn, they learned which bank he was involved with. And through his contacts on LinkedIn, they were able to see who his neighbors were, because there was some personal chat there. And they crafted the email, and it would have been $5 million out the window instantly if the bad guys hadn't simply mistyped the email. So the message there is be very, very clear about when you get these kind of urgent requests, especially from a friend. Be skeptical. Call and verify. Make sure that it's real. The general modus operandi is they impersonate somebody. Usually it's a senior executive, often the CEO, and the person who's the target is usually the CFO or the controller or the head of accounts payable, and they're the ones that are going to get these things. So if you're in that position, there's training that you can get from various organizations, including this one, that will help you be on your toes. Be polite, be courteous, be helpful, but be skeptical. Double check before you send that $5 million, even if it's the CEO and it's a personal favor while he's on vacation. So be diligent and you should be okay.
I think you hit on it with the word training, especially in business. It's great to have your staff and your leadership trained on these things and to know what to look for. Matt, are there certain red flags?
I fear sometimes that people look at this stuff and say, oh, it's an IT issue. I don't need to deal with it. But
Right.
you really do need training by everybody. And the C-suite executives sometimes think they're the ones who need the training most. And they're like, oh, we're too busy. I'm too smart. I don't need to sit through more training. And they're the ones that really need it. And sometimes smaller businesses think that they don't, that this is just something that happens with big corporations. It's not. It's from all sorts of stuff. They've got the crooks are really good at researching who people are, as Bill just described, and they do a really, really thorough job in figuring out who people are at all these other organizations. The other things they're doing now, or they're using, for example, the head of HR at the Chicago Better Business Bureau got an email from supposedly the president saying, gee, I've changed bank accounts. Please directly deposit my paycheck into this new bank account. Well, fortunately, he caught it, but that one's growing really, really rapidly. And a lot of HR offices are having to learn to confirm that they really are people that want their stuff. I talked to one friend with a Chicago corporation and didn't get paid for a couple of weeks. And she called, what's going on? We changed your account. No, I didn't. So that's a really bad one. And sometimes they're sending emails as well, asking people to buy gift cards. And it's the same group of business email compromise gangs. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, we want everybody's input, and that's really valuable. And we talked about some of the things, the ways they're coming in. Can you tell us, Matt, some of the red flags that businesses and individuals should look for to avoid these kind of scams?
Sure. The majority of the cases that we worked at are business email compromise, which, by the way, dwarfs all other frauds. It's not even close. From what we see, again, we handle white collar fraud. So financial and motivated fraudsters. We have a desk that basically handles rapid recovery of stolen funds through business email compromise. Just the other day, in one BEC, $21 million we were able to get back. We've recovered north of $100 million through either the financial fraud kill chain or also just through a quick notification to law enforcement. But the vast majority is through phishing kits. Somebody clicks on, it always starts, somebody clicks on a link, somebody opens an attachment, then bad actors get access to the email accounts. The duality of the BEC is a problem because it could be on your end or it could be on the other end, meaning the person you're doing business with. So a lot of the different types of business email compromise that we see, we touched on CEO impersonation scams. Also, invoices is a big one, where if they're targeting someone in the supply chain for a business, they'll inject same type of thing that was mentioned earlier, either an additional invoice or asking for the company that is going to send and pay the invoice to send it to a new email, or I'm sorry, a new bank coordinates. So that's a fairly common thing that we see. When I say common, every single day we're seeing that. The other thing to keep in mind is the real problem with BECs. Not only is it a problem for businesses, and as mentioned, it's social engineering. Some can be done through technology with DMARC and some other things that looking for domains. But if the person you're communicating with has their email compromised, you're not gonna. It's coming from the same domain. So that's something to be on alert for. Auto forwards and auto deletes are the standard rules that bad actors set up. So auto forwarding all the emails to them and then auto deleting so you don't see it. And then also, I just wanted to touch on real estate BECs. We deal with these on a regular basis, and this, just imagine you're getting ready to close on a house, and you send money based on an email from your whoever you're doing your closing with to a bank account that doesn't belong to them, and then you show up at closing, and the $100, $200, $500,000 that you sent for closing is now in the hands of bad actors. In almost every instance, the answer is verify not through email, through interpersonal, meaning phone. Pick up the phone and call somebody that you know. And in business, always sort of have the approach of dual controls. Never have your business be in a position where one person can affect a multi-million-dollar wire transfer, or however large your business is, whatever that amount is that would be critical if lost to you, that one person is control of that with no other sort of controls in place internally.
Wow. That's great information. We're going to move along, though, and talk about something else that's been in the news a lot lately, and definitely counts as one of the top scams out there. It's ransomware. So, Bill, let's have you tell us what ransomware is, how it works, and then we'll have a discussion about what people can do about it and what the impact is.
Well, sure. The idea behind ransomware is that somehow somebody puts malicious code onto your machine. It encrypts certain files and leaves you with a message that says, you need to send us a certain amount of dollars or Bitcoin or whatever. And once we receive that, we'll unlock your system. That's first level. Second level, sometimes they'll also say, if you don't send us the money, not only will we leave your system locked, but we've got copies of your data and we'll scatter it and sell it. Third, they'll even add a threat that they're going to contact your business partners, your bank, your supply chain, and tell them that, in their opinion, you're doing a bad job with cybersecurity. So it goes from extortion to another kind of extortion. It's a mess. So how it happens, you get an email and you click on a link, and it's that simple. The problem is that there are a lot of vulnerabilities. Even if you keep current, you're still going to have exposures. People will take advantage of those, and the bad actors have automated a lot of this stuff. Colonial Pipeline was, in fact, not attacked by the company that made the ransomware. The ransomware manufacturer sells it to various individuals, or rather rents it, and then they perform the fraud and they give a cut back to the people who make it. So there's an entire criminal supply chain. The measures to disrupt it include, first of all, doing better filtering on emails, detecting indications of compromise, blocking attachments, not opening mail from unknown senders or untrustworthy sites. I'll tell you one measure that is beautifully simple is a couple of firms that I work with simply don't accept email from any site whose DNS record is less than 2 months old. If it's a brand new site and they're sending email, they just throw it out. And if you think about it, what's going to happen in the first 2 months? It's going to be a solicitation, it's advertising. So if in 2 months they're still there and you now begin accepting the email, well, then perhaps you can have a conversation. But just rejecting stuff that, doesn't pass the sniff test is one good way to protect.
Great. Steve, you mentioned Nigeria with the imposter scams. When it comes to ransomware, is there a particular geography this is coming from? Is it homegrown? What are we seeing?
Just a second. It's a robocall.
Huh?
I got a robocall.
No.
Russia. That seems to be where everybody's agreed where this stuff is coming from. Damn it.
Not
I
the
just
most-
got a robocall from Wisconsin.
Yeah,
We're
right.
popular.
So no.
Matt, what are the impacts we're seeing on a national level with these ransomwares?
Well, we're seeing obviously an escalation in ransomware attacks due to the success of the attacks and the publicity that they gain and the amount of money that is being ransomed. So obviously the implications are if back in May, if you try to get gas on the East Coast, that was going to be a problem for you. We've seen airlines get disrupted. We've seen major industry and schools and hospitals and whatnot all get disrupted via ransomware attack. So as was mentioned, a couple of the other things obviously that we try to encourage folks to do is obviously have a disaster recovery plan and a business continuity plan to include testing your offline backups. Because a lot of companies have offline backups, but they didn't test them and realized later down the line that it was going to be cost prohibitive or take too long to even recover via backups, or the tools that they use to implement the backups are also being were also encrypted. So they don't, because they didn't practice sort of an exercise in recovery, that became not useful to them. Obviously, two-factor authentication for account logins using, whenever possible, an authenticator service. Avoid SMS if you can. It's better than nothing. But obviously, there's been recent account data breaches and leaks of mobile lists of mobile subscribers. That's really nothing new to a degree. There's been for years, you could go online to sort of these data aggregators and buy huge lists of people's phone numbers and email addresses and stuff like that to do SIM swapping attacks or to just use it as a vector to attack folks. Also enable password timeouts to prevent brute force attacks. Use the principle of least privilege for user permissions, of course. And then disable remote desktop. So on top of the fact that phishing and leveraging existing botnet infrastructure is how most of the ransomware attacks occur, remote desktop is not something to be overlooked. A lot of attacks that we've seen originate through vulnerabilities in remote desktop application logins.
Wow, it's some big stuff going on there. Are these, we talked about they're coming from Russia. Are these sophisticated, or is it kind of off the rack?
In my view, sometimes us in either in law enforcement or in security get wrapped around sophisticated. or not, it works. It works. So a decent cyber hygiene will go a long way to sort of prevent uh, a lot of these attacks. Understanding that a lot of times that can be difficult downstream, but it's a lot of times, as was mentioned, these are ransomware affiliates. So the actual person on keyboard doesn't have to be, you know, a sophisticated hacker. They're just buying the service. So ransomware as a service, cybercrime as a service is a real thing. It's not going to go away. And so whether how sophisticated it is, it works. It's been very successful and lucrative. And we've seen other actors that were doing payment card frauds and other sort of more cumbersome ways of making money have switched over to ransomware because it has been so lucrative.
Well, is it hard to follow the Bitcoin? Because they
Well,
usually get the money ransom in Bitcoin, as I understand, and then it's in blockchain. So there's supposedly a ledger where you can follow that money.
It's not hard to follow public ledgers. That is true. The real problem with ransomware, at least in our view, is notification. So we don't make a judgment on whether or not you should pay or not pay. The only thing that we wish is that if you paid, that you'd have to report it to the government in some form or fashion. And the challenge is obviously when convertible virtual currency goes overseas to exchanges that don't have know your customer, don't engage with law enforcement, that makes it difficult I run our asset forfeiture branch. We like to seize money. We like to take stuff from bad guys, disgorge them of their ill-gotten gains, right? Inflict consequence whenever possible. It becomes a challenge when it's overseas.
Great. So if somebody is a victim of a scam, what are some of the steps they should do? What should first maybe the individual do, Steve, and then we can ask Bill maybe if he knows about what businesses, small businesses can do.
Well, certainly if they've been a business email compromise scam or ransomware scam, they need to reach out to the Internet Crime Complaint Center immediately. Like the first thing, call your bank, reach out to the feds, because they've had great success in getting this money back where people move fast. Unfortunately, sometimes it's a couple days before people realize that they have been ripped off. So that is the big one for the real big ticket items. For the others, you need to complain to either the FTC, the Better Business Bureau, or the Internet Crime Complaint Center. They get the complaints. Often they just go into a database, but those databases, then you can look for patterns. So if somebody's looking at Acme Corporation or Bill Fraudster, they can look for patterns like common phone numbers, email addresses, and then they've got witnesses to go forward. So it's really a good idea to report to the law enforcement agencies, because they can really help. For individualized help, that's harder. There is, I know Cyber Support Network has got some people now that are doing support groups for romance fraud victims to help them through the emotional trauma they've been through afterwards. We need more of that sort of stuff for victims to help recover from those sorts of things. But for the most part on these stuff, once the money's gone, it's unfortunately just gone. We did, for example, sue Western Union, which we thought knew that massive amounts of fraud were going through their system, but they were making so much money, they just didn't care. And we sued MoneyGram too. We found with MoneyGram actually that 80% of all the money going through their system from the US to Canada was for fraud. And they knew it, and they could have stopped it. So there are law enforcement efforts that come sometimes on the support services for the scams, but those are your main options.
And I'd like to also plug fightcybercrime.org, because there are so many great resources out there, like you said, the IC3, the FTC, Better Business Bureau, Secret Service. To find the right ones, we can help you do that just by going to the website and putting in what your impact was. So I just want to remind people out there about that. But
Well,
there are definitely.
I think it's a problem sometimes because I talk to victims and they think they should be able to call the local Secret Service agents, and and 8 people are going to swarm down the stairs and jump in a car and rush out to their house. And it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. You just don't. These crimes aren't that way where that's going to happen. And so they kind of, so I think people have got expectations sometimes for law enforcement. We're gonna do more than we're really capable of doing.
I think you're right. And again, it comes down to being our own best guard. So Bill, we talked about some of the ways we can protect ourselves, but I think they're worth repeating. I know we talked about training at sea level. But again, let's just repeat some of the things that people can do, because I know people come to these webinars and they want to know.
Well, recently there was an announcement by a group of cybersecurity companies that they've come up with a ransomware readiness test. Now, there are a lot of these out there. CISA just published one. I think we've got a link for another one. This one takes a look at your ability to deal with the aftermath of ransomware. And what they're going to basically do is ask you a number of questions about how you do backups and how reliable your disaster recovery systems are. And this was touched on before, but I want to hit it again because it's really an important point. Having your own copies of your data is ultimately the best protection against ransomware. They got it. They may, threaten to expose it. That's a different issue, but you certainly want to contact law enforcement in that event. But rather than pay money to get your files back, use your recovery plan to get your files back. So have a DR plan, test it at least once a year, and make sure that your critical systems meet their designed recovery point objectives. What's that? How stale can the data be for it to still be useful? If you have to have a backup taken at close of business every day, then take a backup at close of business every day. In fact, don't take one, take 3. Keep one local, keep one on separate media, different system local, and send a third one off site. That way you're able to recover from, I accidentally erased a file, to classical ransomware, to some kind of a disaster and mega ransomware where the information and the tools to recover it are also all gone. The DR plan would be the context for getting that in place.
Does the backup system need to be disconnected from the rest of your system?
You should only connect it during the period of taking backups, or you can use a staged segmented network to store that information with very restrictive rules on what can go in. That way you won't have the malware getting into the backup servers and messing with that copy of the data. But yeah, it should be somewhat isolated.
All right, thank you. And for anyone who is intimidated by some of that talk, Cybercrime Support Network will be launching a program soon in October to help people who are cyber at risk do these steps with a partner, so they can go step by step in a non-intimidating way. It's called Secure Together. So I hope you look for that, and we'll have some news about it. But we were talking about reporting, and Matt, as the reigning law enforcement official here, why is it important to report these cyber crimes? I mean, not just for yourself to try to get restitution, but how is it broader sense?
So the first would be obviously if time is very important. Typically, our success in getting money back is pretty good at 24 hours. After 72 hours, it's very difficult to get money back, when we're talking about BECs and that kind of thing. So that's the first. The second is if it's ransomware, for example, we could provide guidance on whether or not there's already a decryption key for the type of ransomware variant that you have. Can also provide guidance on if you decide to send payment or the type of ransomware it is, what we've seen for successes in actually recovering data. Just provide sort of guidance if there are Treasury has sanctioned a number of actors to some level of notoriety, and so we can let you know as well as if you're planning on sending. Now the Secret Service doesn't would never be in a position to try to double victimize somebody, but it would be something that you'd want to know. But also, we want to arrest people. Our job is to lock people up, and if nobody tells us that they've been the victim of a crime, there's no way for us to actually charge them and build out cases. These are transnational organized groups that are operating all around the globe, that have global infrastructure. The good thing for us is we're also a global organization, as is the FBI and the HSI and some of our other partners. And we work with our allies overseas, from folks in Europol to embassies and law enforcement around the globe. And we want to take the fight to the bad actors. So we don't care who you call, in the sense of saying you call us, call the FBI, just call somebody. And then it's a whole government approach to all of these frauds that we've talked about today. So really, it's that early engagement is most important with us.
Right. And I think one question that a lot of people ask themselves is, when it comes to ransomware, pay or don't pay? What's the theory there?
Well, that's a business decision that each company has to make. We don't offer guidance on whether to pay or not to pay. But what we do strongly ask is that if you do decide to pay, obviously the consequence of paying is you're aiding and abetting the behavior. But we certainly understand if it's a business that can't continue otherwise. That's a business decision that needs to be made. But most importantly for us is, we support, as an agency, a national data breach notification law. There is not one right now. And also a notification if you do decide to send money via typically cryptocurrency, to let us know, or let the Bureau know, so we can at least try to track it, and B, sort of build out our long-term investigative plans.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, finally, we're getting towards the end, so I want to jump to Steve and ask, since your fraud report covers all kinds of news in the cyber world, and we're starting to see more coverage of it. Do you think there's still enough public awareness, or how much further do we have to go as the public to get ahead of this?
It's it is public awareness is really, really important. People have kind of heard of some of this stuff. My wife used to say she would like to see more of this on TV, which would be really useful. I think people are interested in this. People have gotten these phone calls. They're curious, what the hell is this about my auto warranty, for example? What's that all about? And they have a genuine interest in it. And there are some good consumer reporters out there. Actually, I think media in Canada does a better job of getting the word out on some of this stuff, at least on a network level, than we do in the United States. And also, people need to know, okay, what do I really need to worry about? Which ones are really of concern? Because you can't tell people be afraid, be very afraid. They need something to kind of to seize on. And unfortunately, we've got some misconceptions that are going on in our head. I think there are people that think this stuff is rare. It only happens to stupid people or people that are senile. I would be able to tell. And one of the bad things out there is we've all seen these Nigerian dead dictator letters, et cetera, stuff. They use terrible, bad grammar. And people say, God, who but a moron would fall for those? There's an answer to that, but I won't get into it here. But they think from that they should be able to detect at somebody that it's a scam. That they should be able to tell by the tone of people's voices, or they should be able to use, they can tell if their kids are fibbing to them, but they think those skills will help them with a telemarketer on the phone. They don't. I mean, those people are professionals. So people forget that con man is short for confidence man. They gain your confidence, and you trust them. You believe who they are, and that's why people fall for these things. A lot of these scams, I'm convinced, are like business email compromise. It's like a magic trick. It can't be for real, but you have no idea what's going on. If somebody stops and shows you what the trick is, then you say, oh my God, it was so obvious all along. Why didn't I spot that? And I talk to scam victims and they have the same sort of reaction. I think they feel that they think, oh, I must be really stupid because I fell for this. Well, it wasn't that you're stupid. It's just a very clever thing. You didn't know what the catch was. You didn't know what the trick was that you were supposed to look for. And it's really not your fault out there, but for the grace of God. I've been caught up in a scam. I'm sure everybody on here has too. This stuff's coming at us on every day by phone and email and text message and our regular US mail, and some of the stuff's going to get through. So if it needs, definitely we need more education, and we need to also, with that education, tell people what is the serious scams and stuff that's kind of very rare anymore that they're really unlikely to run across. And I think that would do a lot. Yeah.
And
One thing I'd like
Demetria,
to just,
oh, no,
I'm
please.
sorry, I was just going to add a very brief message. The people who talk about cyber insurance helping, two notes on that. The first is that many cyber insurance companies have stopped writing large policies. It used to be, 5 years ago or more, ransomware was 20, 50 grand for a business and, a couple hundred to 1,000 for an individual. Now the payouts are in the millions, and you'll have a very hard time getting a new cyber insurance policy that'll pay out 6 figures or more. It's 7 figures or more. It's just not going to happen. So do not rely on insurance as a way to lay off the risk on these things.
That's a great point. Thank you for making that, because that's one of the things that I think a lot of people, especially with the smaller businesses, wonder about and worry about. As is emerging technologies. I mean, cybercrime seems to be ahead of the curve with some of the technology they use. Can anybody speak to if we know if consumer technology is going to catch up anytime soon, or are there things that we can implement on a technical basis, on an individual technical basis, that may help?
Well, the first and most important thing is to keep your systems current. Pick an AV vendor. I work for one. I don't care which one you use. I'm not compensated in sales. I just want you to use one. Keep it current. Run scans. Keep your systems up to date. Run scans. Be skeptical of those emails. And before you send somebody money, sit back and ask yourself, is this somebody I really know and trust? Is this somebody that I really want to see that? Go for it. Now, the other kinds of things that can happen to computers, you can get, coin miners that are quietly using CPU resources to create Bitcoin for somebody else. Those are stealthy, they're hard to see. But when it comes to ransomware, the three most common kinds of attacks are the targeted attack, where they figured something out about you and sent you a cleverly worded craft email. First. Second, a misconfigured product, so you didn't have certain options disabled. And third, a system that's unpatched. Statistically, we've actually seen a decrease in the number of ransomware attacks. What we've seen increase is the amount of money that the people are asking their victims to pay. So it's still very lucrative. It's just no longer the blind, spray and pray that somebody clicks on the link. Getting smarter and crap, and it's all automated. It's not some guy sitting up late at night typing email addresses into a computer. That's 20 years ago.
Hey, Bill, I have heard that there are millions of people, millions of us who've got bots on our computers that are hooked into networks, and that the spammers, for example, are using our computers to send spam email in the middle of the night. If I run just an antivirus, will that catch that sort of stuff?
If it's relatively current, yes. And not just because it'll scan for patterns, but contemporary antivirus products, both consumer and business, will look for indications of compromise and odd behaviors, like generating 1 million emails or sending 10,000 fragmented TCP IP messages carrying Modbus commands. I mean, it is much better than it was before. Contemporary anti-malware products will identify situations that they have not seen and send them back to home. If you're using our stuff, we actually have 5 labs, 800 researchers globally distributed. You click on a link, It's something we've never seen before. It'll go up to our thing, be analyzed, and we'll have a patch or a block or remediation distributed typically within 8 hours, sometimes in less than 1 hour globally.
The other type of technology, I guess, I have been at least hearing about is people are using AI to create video. So apparently now, for just a few dollars, you instead of getting a phone call from the boss telling you to send money to a new bank account, you might get a Zoom call and you think you're talking to the boss, and it looks like him or it sounds like his voice, and they're using AI to impersonate that, and that stuff is really scary.
Yeah, Matt, have we seen that? Is the Secret Service seeing that come across the desk?
No, not in any material way. What we have seen is folks, if they're into somebody's network or system, grabbing the Active Directory photos of people and then communicating with them offline. So, for example, they'll use a WhatsApp or something like that and say, and have the little thumbnail picture of the CEO and say, hey, you know, I can't log into my my work email, but I need you to execute on this whatever and send money here and there, that kind of stuff. We haven't seen any sort of deep fakes or anything like that of any real consequence so far. But we certainly have. We've seen attempts to use it to gain access into devices for sure. But we haven't seen anything where it's been like not yet anyway, any substantive like direct communications, like a WebEx event or something like that.
Great. And I, since we had the technical problem at the beginning, I should have mentioned that every resource that's being chatted out here today for you, every link, will be put in a document and sent to attendees sometime this week after the program has ended. So look out for that in case you missed anything. We are coming towards the end though, so I want to just see if anybody has, each one of you want to put in any last words, any last points you want to make sure hit home with the viewers. We can start with you, Bill.
Yeah, the two things I'd ask is, take backups of critical files, make sure you can recover them first. And second, keep your systems up to date.
And Matt?
So the message that I always try to get across to folks is understand what is available to you or about you. All of ours, if you're over 40 years old, your DOB, your social, your address, your previous address is available online for pennies on the dollar. Freeze your credit, absolutely freeze your credit, and then lock down social media. Don't provide an avenue for bad actors to easily guess knowledge-based authentication questions. Lock it down. We Americans have this high degree of self-disclosure. We want to tell everybody everything. Bad actors are on a daily basis leveraging that information against either accounts that you control or against you or that kind of stuff. So be very mindful of that as well. Thank you.
Great. And Steve?
Well, I always tell people, speak out. What we know is something like 8% of victims of scams reported to the Better Business Bureau or law enforcement, meaning over 90% don't. People are embarrassed. I tell them, don't get mad, don't get embarrassed, get mad. Speak out, let law enforcement know so they've got that so they can try to take out some of these other actors. The other new development I guess I've mentioned is the crooks have discovered Bitcoin in small amount transactions. For example, I'm outside St. Louis in the suburbs, and within 10 miles of me, there's like 20 Bitcoin ATM machines. So scam victims, instead of being asked to pay by credit card or stuff, are now being asked to go down and plug money into a Bitcoin machine. And they're loading in $20 bills for a couple $1,000. And then I guess they get a code that they can provide to the scammer so the scammer can get the money. So the scammers are turning consumers towards Bitcoin pretty fast too. We need to watch those ATM machines.
Thank you. And I see that one of our CSN's own, Eileen, posted a link there to FBI field offices for the cases that need to go there. You can locate your local one. One of the things I took away from this great conversation is we are our own best guard. We cannot rely on technology. We need to make sure that we're doing the work to make sure our systems are complete and secure. So we're going to end it here, I believe, but I want to thank you all three of you for being our guests today. This is great information. I'm glad I got to speak with you. I'm sorry that Cindy could not. Technical difficulties cannot be surmounted even a year and a half into this mess, but we will be back bigger and stronger. And if anybody has questions, they can reach out to us at CSN, and we're happy to take care of you. Thanks again, and take care.
Thank you.
Be well.